If you're a fan of the channel, you'd know I love the Persona series. Almost every one of my videos has at least one Persona song. Now, for a while I've wanted to incorporate my love for Persona and the greater Shin Megami Tensei universe as a whole into my channel. That isn't a meme or an occasional one-off video. For a long time I wanted to take a deep dive into Takamiki's character and why she's fundamentally misunderstood by the fan base, or how Persona 4's design are genius within its subtlety, or even how Raido Kuzunoha vs King Abaddon fundamentally evolves the Raido gameplay from a story standpoint with its quality of life changes. But today, I'm not going to talk about any of that. I want to take a look at the first Persona game, the one that started it all, Megami Ibenroku Persona, or rather Persona Be Your True Mind, and why I believe it's a flawed masterpiece worth your time. And if you're a fan of Persona or JRPGs in general, I'd think you should play it. But before all that, if you're new here, please subscribe. I make these types of analytical videos on anime, manga, video games, and all things pop culture. If you want to take that support a step further, consider joining the Patreon or picking up something from the channel's continued partner, Boomslank. Now today I'll be talking about the PSP version of Persona 1, since that's the one I played. However, my experience is going to be a little bit skewed because I played a fan patch that replaces the PSP's version of the soundtrack with that of the PlayStation 1. While I do like the PSP's OST, the original truly captures the essence of what a game like Persona, at least in this case, is. But before I can get deeper into the themes, characters, and ups and downs, I'll have to recap the story briefly. And there will be spoilers for the Persona series going forward, so if you're just here looking for should you play this game or not, yes. If you don't care about spoilers, then allow me to continue. What is Persona about? Megami Ibenroku Persona is set in 1996 and revolves around the protagonist and his classmates at the St. Hermelin High School in Makage-cho. Hideko Usagi persuades all of his friends to participate in a game called Persona, which is similar to Bloody Mary. While playing, these students lose consciousness and encounter Philemon, who grants them the ability to summon personas, which are mirrors of their personalities. Now, Philemon is a constant character in every Persona game, represented by the butterfly, but in here he takes a more human form. He manifests as something not in the background, but an entity that guides you through your journeys. Think of what Igor would become later in the game, because Igor doesn't really play such a big role in Persona 1. Soon after, the protagonist and some of his friends go to see Maki Sonomura, a friend of theirs who is sick and bedridden. They realize the town is shifting and that demons are roaming the streets during their visit. Now, Maki's mother, an engineer for the company Sebek, informs the party that the perpetrator of said demonic takeover is Takahisa Kandori, the company's president. So after you escort her back to school, the only place that is free of demons, you decide to embark on your journey to put an end to Kandori's plans. Now, Persona 1 has two stories, the Sebek route, which is the main story of the game, and an optional route called the Snow Queen quest. I haven't played that route, so I'm not going to speak about it today, although when I do get to it, I might consider making a video on it. So with that quick summary out of the way, let's talk about the central characters that accompany you, the protagonist, on his quest. Maki, Mark, and Nanjo, with the fifth member, not including yourself, being left up to your choice, but it isn't quite clear without using a guide, so I ended up getting stuck with Brown for my playthrough. So this is where I'm going to go into the characters and dissect them. So let's take a look at the starting lineup. First, with my favorite character of the bunch, or at least one of them, Ki Nanjo. Nanjo is the most logical member of the group, which is good and bad. At 2 points in the story, Nanjo suggests sacrificing 2 innocent people in order to save everyone else. The professor in charge of managing the Deva system, which is the system that Kandori uses to start this entire thing into motion, who trapped himself in the mechanism with Kandori to prevent him from destroying reality, and the true Maki Sonomura, discovered after the ideal Maki escaped from the party. Now, I know I just said a bunch of stuff that doesn't make sense now, and you know, for more context, obviously go play the game, but I will be touching on the true Maki later in this video. These actions are frowned upon by the party and are pivotal pivotal choices that are left up to the protagonist to determine how the story goes. Under Nanjo's cold exterior lies someone who is a bit more conscious of his own perception, as he's embarrassed by his butler, or rather father figure, Yamaoka, calling him young master. He's also quite hardworking and strives to become Japan's #1 man, as noted by the tie he has wrapped around his neck. As the game continues on, Nanjo sheds that cold, logical exterior and becomes more empathetic, as he learns to value the other people in the friend group aside from the protagonist himself. This journey is somewhat personal to him, not only because of Maki, but because of his family's history with Kandori. He holds the Hierophant Arcana, shared by characters like Persona 3's Shinjiro, Persona 4's Dojima, and Persona 5's Sojiro. The Hierophant represents education, authority, conservatism, rule following, and a relationship with the divine. A Hierophant is someone who interprets divine secrets or esoteric principles. This arcana typically has no weakness or strengths and can be applied to Nanjo as a character and his goal, as I said earlier, being very logical and stone-faced, willing to do what needs to be done regardless of emotional attachment, and even being able to carry on after losing Yamaoka. On the inverse, he isn't able to do these things on his own, and he hasn't reached the places he's set to go in life yet. Being here to the Nanjo group, this drive again is representing by the desire to be Japan's #1 man. Now in Persona 1, unlike other games, not only can the main character summon multiple personas, but the party members can as well, and this is represented by their secondary arcana, which is a system in the game that determines which character has more ease of use using certain personas while others struggle using them. Nanjo's secondary arcanas are strength, which is associated with the morality that surrounds the power of self-control, kindness, courage, and virtue above brute force. Secondly, the moon, which can and oftentimes indicate being subconsciously attuned to one's surroundings, obtaining the ability to feel things without being told about them or without anyone else knowing. And lastly, the world, which is a symbol of satisfaction, wholeness, and harmony, and it represents the totality of the world. Now let's look at Masao Inaba, or Mark. Mark is the polar opposite of Nanjo. He's brash, impulsive, a class clown with a strong sense of justice and a fondness for Maki, as he frequently visits her in the hospital. He has an act first, asks questions later kind of attitude when people in front of him are in danger. He lashes out during one of the story's boiling points, punching Nanjo for suggesting to sacrifice the true Maki Shimura after the ideal Maki escapes from the party. Mark holds the Chariot Arcana, which symbolizes victory, conquest, self-assertion, self-confidence, control, war, and command are all represented by the Chariot Arcana. Characters with this arcana are often highly motivated and athletic persons with a personal objective that they are determined to obtain at whatever cost. They are often brash yet good-hearted, struggle with faults or uncertainties that they initially attempt to conceal from everyone else, but gradually reveal to the protagonist. The hidden truth could be interpreted as his crush on Maki, not letting it bog him down, only caring about her well-being and not who she ends up with. His arcana is shared with Aigis from Persona 3, Chie from Persona 4, and Ryuji from Persona 5. He also shares the same secondary arcana as Nanjo, symbolizing how much more similar these two are by the end of the journey when it comes to core values and morality. Now, I would speak about Brown, but throughout my playthrough, he didn't really stand out to be as adding in much as compared to Mark, Nanjo, or Maki, and that's most likely because, as I said before, he is an optional party member, as his story isn't as flushed out as the others. He has a moment of weakness where he breaks the facade of the clown he's been portrayed to be, but other than that, I feel like Brown offers really nothing, at least to me, so I'll speak about the protagonist instead. Being a surprise to absolutely no one, the protagonist of Persona 1 is a silent protagonist, as he fills the role of the player. The decisions that lead to the game's good ending and the acquisition of his ultimate persona, on the other hand, present the protagonist as a natural leader, a kind, insightful, yet blunt individual who is driven to discover his personal reason for living as opposed to hiding from the truth. The protagonist also has a rude, informal, and laid-back side. For example, example, his other self in the Alaya cavern tells Maki to shut up so he can continue concentrating on his game. And he refers to Igor as Old Man Igor after giving the persona item to fuse the party's ultimate persona. Now, his Arcana is the Emperor. Now, in the Persona universe, Emperor Arcana characters are often aspiring male leaders or strong male allies. They may be intimidating at first, but they're ultimately harmless and even comical. These characters have often lost touch with the guidance of someone they trust, and they are trying to find balance with being in complete control over their lives and trying not to become what they are ashamed of. At first, they are purist in their beliefs and refuse to see things from different perspectives. However, over time, they learn from their mistakes and come to understand the importance of trusting others. Characters that share this Arcana are Persona 3's Akihiko Sanada, Persona 4's Kanji Tatsumi, and Persona 5's Yusuke Kitagawa. Just like Nanjo and Mark before him, the protagonist shares these same secondary arcana of strength, moon, and the world. I think the protagonist does embody what the core message of Persona is, finding your reason to continue living. At least that's one of Persona's cores, and I really do like that about him. Despite him being silent, I just feel like he clicked with me on a certain level, despite him being mostly silent and an outlet for me as the player to my shoes in, but I digress. Now onto Maki Shimura, who to me is the true protagonist of Persona 1. She is the cornerstone of the story, the protagonist and antagonist at the same time. Maki was born with a frail body and had spent the majority of her life in and out of hospital. She is a sweet and caring young lady who is always willing to assist people. She is also an accomplished artist and painter. Maki's poor health prevented her from enjoying many of the simple things in life, which made her profoundly unhappy. She was envious of those who could go to school and have fun with friends, and she felt isolated and alone. As a result of Takahashi Kandori's experiments via the Deva system, Maki's personality fragmented into different parts. One of these parts was the ideal Maki, who was cheerful and outgoing. The ideal Maki was a way for the true Maki to cope with her unhappiness and to imagine a life where she was healthy and happy. The other fragmented personalities manifest into Mai, Aki, and Pandora. Mai and Aki take the form of childlike versions of our main Maki, retaining her same facial features. The only difference between the two is that Mai wears an all-white dress and is privy to helping the party later in the game, and Aki dresses in all black and is the representation of the darker side of Maki, being a constant antagonist to our heroes. Finally, we move on to Pandora, who is Maki Shimura's ultimate expression of nihilism, the concept that life is worthless and without purpose. Following Kandori's death, Aki awakens Pandora, but Pandora consumes her and wipes out half of Mikage Cho in the process. She then proceeds to steal the core of the Diva system from the real world. The party enters the Vita world, which is the game's final dungeon, and confronts Pandora, who intends to destroy all reality by using the Diva system's core. Pandora is eventually defeated, and she's puzzled about how the party has grown so strong. The party reminds her that they were fighting as friends and she wasn't alone. Pandora then merges with the ideal Maki, and the party members return to the real world one by one. Maki symbolizes the best and worst a person can become. She embodies the entire point of Persona 1. Anyone can change no matter what situation. Strength can be found anywhere. The only way to move on and grow is to accept every part of yourself, to face challenges head on instead of looking for the easy way out, to get up when life kicks you down instead of wallowing in self-pity. Persona is about the strength within. Be your true mind. It's just something about the hopeful message within Persona 1's gothic, almost nihilistic atmosphere that makes the message so much better to me. The good ending almost brought tears to my eyes as Maki stands alone with the protagonist, thanking him for what he's done for her, confessing her love before they all go back to the real world as they all graduate from high school alongside Maki. Something that would have only been a fever dream during the early hours of the game. Maki's primary arcana is the Priestess. She shares the same persona as Persona 3's Fuka Yamagishi, Persona 4's Yukiko Amagi, Best Girl, and Persona 5's Makoto Nejima. Members of the Priestess Arcana are often faced with a dilemma: how to balance their own needs and desires with their desire to help others. This can be a difficult struggle, as it can be hard to know where to draw the line between self-care and selfishness. On the other hand, members of the priestess Arcana are often naturally compassionate and caring individuals. They have a deep understanding of human nature and are often drawn to helping others. They may feel a strong calling to make a difference in the world and to use their skills and talents to help others. Maki has several secondary arcanas, so let's get through them in order, starting with the Lover's Arcana, which represents duality, agreement, and emotions. It is often associated with love and relationships, but it can also represent other types of choices and decisions. The Lover's Arcana was originally depicted as two paths life could lead to, and thus a symbol of standing at a crossroad and needing to make a decision. Now, the Hermit Arcana can be represented by isolation and loneliness. Those who are too withdrawn from the world can become cut off from others and from their own emotions. They all put themselves in settings that keep them hidden from the public view instead of putting oneself in the spotlight. Hermits withdraw from others or take on a more supportive role. Now, in Maki's case of the Hermit, it's when Maki isolates herself from the party, hiding her face, as she's too ashamed to face them for the things that she's done. Now, Temperance. Characters of this Arcana frequently struggle to find balance in their life and activities, dealing with considerable stress while making enormous efforts to conceal it. This imbalance and stress are caused by the absence of someone dear to them. In Maki's case, it's her mother's absence in her life due to work. Now, we move on to the Star Arcana. The Star Arcana's characters often establish themselves about halfway through the protagonist's quest. They exhibit the qualities of their Arcana, hopefulness and joy, while being somewhat antisocial and coping with intense personal and external problems. Their connections to the protagonist aid them in understanding what they genuinely desire, and in doing so, recognizes and accepts misconceptions about the directions their life will take. And finally, the Sun. Characters from the Sun Arcana are generally often isolated and in extremely bad conditions. As a result, they must reconsider the true meaning of their morality before they can accept who they are and the circumstances in which they find themselves. Each and every one of these Arcana's main and secondary truly define the character assigned to them, and it shows the level of thought put into the character writing. I also felt as though Kandori was an interesting villain. He starts off as your typical unscrupulous businessman, but in typical JRPG fashion becomes a god at the end of the game, as he's the final obstacle the party must face before the game's true final boss. Kandori is the reason the world is in the state it's in. He uses the reality-altering diva system to contact Maki's malevolent half, Aki, and gain control over half of Nakage Cho. What I like about Kandori is he does achieve what he wants, but he's left feeling empty because of it. He asks the party to kill him so he can experience death, as life holds no meaning to him now that he's transcended to godhood, which is something I've never seen before in a JRPG. Now, I'm not saying that it doesn't exist. I'm sure it's out there in the sea of thousands of JRPGs, but it was new to me, and it really gave his character another layer instead of being your typical cookie cutter antagonist. Now, I've spoken about the characters in the story, but what makes Persona flawed? Well, it's the structure. A lot of characters don't get enough time to shine within the story, and that wouldn't be a problem because the game encourages you to do multiple playthroughs. However, this isn't realistically possible as it has no New Game Plus, which in itself isn't a big deal until you factor in how dated and grindy the gameplay is. Persona 1 plays more akin to early Shin Megami Tensei than it does modern Persona. It's first-person dungeon crawling mixed with a grid-based battle system that is overly complicated, and it doesn't need to be. On top of the extremely high encounter rate and later difficulty spikes, it makes the later half of the game a pain to progress through. And that's why I haven't done the Snow Queen quest yet. On top of how grindy it was to get these subsequent personas, the subsequent ultimate personas for you and your party, each party member has 2 levels that need to be equal: the player's individual character level and a separate persona level. If these 2 levels aren't equal, you cannot use a higher level persona. That wouldn't be a problem if the latter didn't level up slower than the former, as at the end of the game, my persona level was about 5 levels under my main character, and I essentially had to grind twice as much to get the main character's ultimate persona, and trust me, you need that to beat the final boss. I do think this game would benefit from a pixel remaster treatment, if not a full remake in the style of modern Persona, while keeping all the aspects that make the game feel like Persona 1. But even with these issues in mind, I can't lie when I say I love Persona 1, and it's easily become my game of the year. I'm excited for the Persona 1 mobile port that's coming to the Switch and Steam. Now, I don't know if it's going to get an official translation, but you know, a fan patch I assume will be on the way eventually. I hope I was able to convince some of you to check this game out. As I said earlier, I plan to make more Persona and Shin Megami Tensei content later down the line. And I hope this video wasn't too confusing, because Persona 1 is a confusing game to, you know, really dissect and talk about. But anyway, this is Grimtoki, this has been Beyond Animation, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.